I often ask students what type of note taking they do, and far and away, the most common response is that they highlight or they underline in books. This is a real popular thing to do. But there's just one problem. Uh, it's passive, right? You're just sort of marking up the text. And in other words, you're not really doing anything yourself other than, just highlighting. And ultimately, this is because it's ineffective. Because it's passive, it's much less strongly connected to memory. And, have you ever had this happen where you go and you highlight something, and then a couple days later, you pick up the book and you look at the highlighted passage, and you're like, why did I highlight this? And you're pretty much back to square one. You're back to reading again. Uh, there's other ways to take notes, right? You can take notes in the margin, like you see here on this poem, right? Uh, Unlike highlighting, this is active, right? Because you have to actually do something. You got to write the note. Um, and if you're doing summary writing, this can be pretty useful. If the only thing I'm writing about is Howl, this poem Howl, then this can be pretty effective, right? Like maybe there's a quote in here I want. Well, I don't have to go and rewrite the quote, right? And I can connect my reaction directly to the quote, and it's kind of all in one place. Um, so here's a form of note taking that can be effective, and a lot of us maybe have tried, but I think for synthesis writing, there's absolutely a better way to take notes, and that is where you take notes on a single piece of paper or document, right? Maybe that's a piece of paper like in a notepad, or it might just be like a document on your computer. Okay, again, this is active because you're doing something, right? You're actually typing stuff out. But the reason this is so ideal from synthesis is that, if let's say you're taking notes on like 10 different things, you got 10 different research studies you're looking at. You're really going to go and mark up 10 different things, and then it's like, okay, where's study number 8? I can't find it on my desk. You keep all your notes in the same place. It's super convenient. You can even start composing your essay right on that same document, so everything is right there. And here's the thing, if your notes are decent, then you don't need to go back to the sources again. You can just work off your note page, and that is takes so much of the stress out of writing. Everything is there for you. Now, look, if you think making mental notes works for you, that's okay. I tell you that you start to get to be my age, and that just stops working for you. All right, so I would or maybe you have something else that works for you. Maybe you do like a combination of these things, but for at least for this class, I would encourage you to try this approach of taking notes on a separate piece of paper document if you're not yet used to it. Okay, let me give you an example of what this would look like. So, okay, for that response B, which we saw earlier, here are some notes on those passages. Okay, I'm using a handwritten font to make it look that way. Okay, so here's passage 1. All right, passage 2, that's a little longer, right? So you got more notes. And then here's the video. All right. If you look at these notes, you'll notice that they favor a particular type of information: details and quotes. What you're not seeing quite as much of is abstract ideas, right? Uh, there's a reason for this, right? Because there's a process that plays out of this here. Let me show you that process. After you've got your document, I would encourage you to write down for each source where you found it. Like if maybe you've just got like a hyperlink, you can just copy and paste, or you have a library call number or something. That way, if you do need to go back to it, you got immediate access. But and then focus on those key details and quotes. Here's the thing: once you got details and quotes, you can start looking for connections between them. It's easier to see the connections if you're thinking concretely rather than abstractly. Let me show you what this looks like, right? So, you got all these different sources. You got 3 of them, but there's some connections between them. For instance, so these sources kind of talk about the students at Berkeley being, kind of outstanding or special in some way, right? There's some examples from the first passage, but there's also some examples of that in the video, all right? But there's also stuff in these passages about students struggling, right? Like, stuff that comes up in the video or in the second passage. So, from all these passages, you can get these 2 groups of ideas. The students are outstanding, the students kind of struggle, right? Once you've got groups, then you can take a step back, and this really is the last step, is to think about the topic, to think about the main idea. It's much easier to match one topic to lots of ideas than it is to match lots of ideas to one topic, right? Save the big picture stuff for the end. In this case, we look back here, well, topic, all of this stuff seems to be about students, right? So in particular, Berkeley students. So that's the topic. And then finally, we got that more abstract main idea. This is something that can work out over time, that you can develop during the writing. You don't necessarily need to figure this out at the note-taking stage, but if you look here, it seems to be kind of two main ideas. They're outstanding, but they struggle. And there's kind of an interesting contrast there, right? And so I encourage you to try this own note-taking process, in this class, but also beyond, especially when you're doing synthesis writing.